Deputy Doherty, please.
Very good, Carly, and welcome our guests to the committee. Mr. Spring, you talked in response to the chairperson's questions in relation to taking up the position as Public Interest Director, the time that would be involved. You estimated at 40 days. You then indicated to the bank that you'd be available for 60 days. Is that 60 days? Is that days for attendance at meetings, or is there other work outside of meetings that?
It would be both, in the sense that there's a lot of work for preparation for meetings, in terms of briefing oneself for meetings, and then there are meetings, and also there's a lot of work in the present time in terms of what I would call continuous education, training, which we are presently undergoing. Just if I do an example, last week we had our board risk meeting at 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. The meeting lasted for 4 hours. Then we had a working dinner at the board of the bank. We started our board meeting at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, and that lasted until 2:30. And then we went into a training session which lasted until 6:30 that evening, and on Friday morning we resumed the training session which lasted from 8:30 on Friday morning until 1 o'clock on Friday. So they're the sort of, that's, if you like, the working week of the bank. There are other meetings obviously in between. I would say where the 40 days arose, that was indicated as the central bank's requirement. If you would want to be, you'd want to commit yourself to being available, which I was in a position to do. But I saw that there was extra work involved, and I put it in writing to the chairman that I was quite prepared to do an extra 20 days as well.
Okay. I note that the number of meetings that you attended last year was 24. And Mr. Summers, I think your number of meetings that you attended last year was 22. But can I say, particularly to yourself, Mr. Spring, like of the four, I've made this point before with all the public interest directors that were in, but of the 4 public interest directors that are former government ministers, you're the person who's in receipt of the highest government pension. You're in receipt of €121,108 per annum. And each year, last year for example, your fees were €59,000. Excluding last year, you've received fees of €132,000 since the time of your appointment, and this is on top of the fact that you've got what I think is a lavish pension. Like, I genuinely don't believe that anybody, any public servant should be in receipt of pensions of €121,000, never mind the fact that they're getting fees of €59,000. The 60 days that you talked about equates to €1,000 per day. That's your fee for as a public interest director on the board of AIB, €1,000 per day. Now that's a very heavy fee for your involvement, given the fact that the state is already paying you $121,000, and I know that everybody pays tax on their incomes. You're a socialist. You've said that before. Do you believe that it's appropriate that people like yourself who are serving in the public interest are claiming such an extraordinary amount of money from the taxpayer?
I think, Deputy, that the fees which I have outlined are reasonable for the effort and the time that I put into working in Allied Irish banks. And my pension as a former deputy, which you will be entitled to in time, and as a former minister, and you will obviously get a ministerial pension if you ever achieve ministerial office, and I think you'll be perfectly entitled to it. There's another way of looking at this. I have turned down numerous invitations to take up other positions, which would be equally, if not more, lucrative than working for Allied Irish banks, and I have turned them down. 2, in fact, in the last number of months, because I don't have the time and I'm not available. I think that the payments are reasonable for the time and effort put in.
I think that your answer to whether you're worth the €1,000 per day fee on top of your pension rings very similar, if you don't mind me saying, Mr. Summers, to your answer when you were receiving over €1 million in payment as the chief of the NTMA. I think while you may believe that public servants should get these lavish pensions and also €1,000 a day for serving on the board of AIB, which a lot of people don't believe is serving their interest, particularly the 1 in 4 people out there who are in mortgage distress, people who've seen increased fees, people who've seen the variable interest rates increase, not in line with the ECB, that they feel that is not appropriate, and I share that view. Can I move on in terms of the personal insolvency bill that's concluding in the Dáil at this point in time? The personal insolvency bill, as you know, will allow for those that are in mortgage distress to restructure their loans. Basically, they will be able to reduce their debt burden, or in plain English, they'll be able to get debt written off after a process and after a period of time. Is it your views as public interest directors, to both of you, that this is something that needs to be ensured, that AIB need to ensure that debt write-offs take place after that process is completed? Will you be ensuring that AIB does not use the veto which is contained within the Act that allows AIB to disregard this issue? And I just want to draw your attention to what Fergus Murphy of AIB said when he was before this committee. When questioned by myself, that the sum of that has been written off so far has been €600,000 so far. He says, the point I was making is that any write-offs will be minuscule or near zero in that context. Let us say that 600,000 on a balance sheet of 95 billion is zero. We are not writing off debt. Do you agree with that, and do you believe that this is the position that that bank will take or should take after the personal insolvency bill has come into law?
Deputy, first of all, I think that AIB will comply fully with the terms of the Insolvency Act. I'm not an expert on that. I heard for the first time this morning, actually, about this 5-year thing. I happened to listen to a programme on the radio. I mean, the aim of AIB is to try and deal with their customers without having to go near this legislation. I mean, there's no upside in trying to get blood from a turnip. You know, if people haven't got money, well, they can't pay up, and that's it. Now, there has been a lot of discussion about this idea of debt forgiveness and what exactly forgiveness means. Now, you know, I'm so long in the tooth, and I mean, I'm a Roman Catholic, that forgiveness means a certain thing to me. I mean, it meant that you went into confession and your wrongdoings were forgiven to you. Now, I don't think that the bank is going to engage in sort of divine mercy or anything like that. But what they will do is deal with individuals and look at the totality of what their liabilities are, what their income is. They will leave them with a sufficient amount of cash to have a reasonable quality of life, living standard, and then try and deal with them as regards what happens with the rest of the loan. And by the way, in this restructuring, if that does involve, you know, eliminating debt, well, so be it. I mean, if the money can't be got, can't be got.
The last number of years, people are in mortgage distress. This doesn't happen today or last week. People are in serious mortgage distress. The government has had to bring in far-reaching legislation, although flawed because it retains a veto with the bank to actually engage with this. So you can say that you'll act under the law. Of course you will. The law provides you with a veto. The question is in what people want and what politicians want, and indeed I think what the government want is for you not to use that veto, but to actually engage in debt write-down after the process has taken place. After the process has taken place. The problem is, to date, as directors of your bank, there has only been €600,000 written off for distressed mortgage holders out of a total of €95 billion. Like, what signal is there, or what confidence or comfort can you give this committee and the people watching at home that there's going to be a new direction with AIB in relation to debt write-off? If AIB were doing their job properly, there would be no need for this type of legislation that the government are bringing forward.
I don't know what the discussion that you had with the AIB people was about the 600,000, or whether they undertook to give you any further information on that. It does seem to be a very small figure. I think in writing off loans, etc., I mean, money doesn't come from nowhere. That's somebody else's money that has to be written off, and you know, it's probably out of the state pension fund.
Okay, yeah. Euro system.
And you know, the bank officials do need to be careful in what they're doing, that they're not being hoodwinked by people. But there's something like 37,000 people, I think, who have to be individually dealt with. Now that if you go to the Aviva Stadium, there's an awful lot of people there. That's about 3/4 of the fill of the stadium. All those people have to be individually dealt with in respect of the totality of their financial setup. I mean, some of them are in distress because of their house loans. Some of them are buy-to-lets. Some of them have SMEs. I mean, I hear all kinds of stories about how people got themselves into a mess by borrowing too much from banks, and now they're distressed they can't pay the stuff back. The intention, certainly from AIB's point of view, is we will not be throwing people out on the streets. Some deal will have to be cut, and if that involves the writing down of debt, well, so be it.
Well, can I just say that it hasn't happened to date, or only to the value of 600,000? Do you believe that when a director of the central bank stated in the comments that have been reported quite widely in relation to other banks, if I can paraphrase her, that you are behaving like spoiled children and what he is waiting for? Do you believe, as director of the central bank, that she was right in her comments in relation to the bank, obviously the board of directors who direct the bank, that, what are you waiting for? Are you behaving like spoiled children? Why aren't you dealing with this mortgage crisis? And we've had the central bank before us in this committee and the regular, and they've told us that they're not happy with the way that the banks are working to deal with the mortgage crisis. Do you believe that you are behaving in that way?
I frankly don't. I mean, I don't know what the context was, but those comments I read about in the newspaper got great headlines, because I think anything to do with bashing banks gets very good headlines. I mean, it's only in relatively recent times that the bank has put together this team of 2,000 people. They all had to be retrained. I mean, the problem with the banks was they were used to lending money. They were much less accustomed to actually getting it back and dealing with people who got into distress. I mean, we all know how we got into this mess, that money was being made too freely available. Now these people have to be retrained, reprogrammed to say, well, look, now we have to clean up this mess that has been created. That has only been done in relatively recent times, I think really since Mr. Duffy came on board as the CEO. And I mean, we're ready to go, and he has these people out working